Good morning, everyone. Good to see everybody who's come out today. Beautiful day, isn't it, that we're blessed with? A little cold, you know. It's a little colder up here than it is down at my house. But it's all right. God's good. Been good forever, still good, always will be good. And I'm thankful for that. Brother Jimmy announced we are going to have a baptizing next Sunday back here in the fellowship hall. In the baptistry, we have some people that want to be baptized. I knew we already had some, but then I got a call this week that some others might be interested, and I said, boy, right now's the time to do it, you know. So baptistry will be full. If you would like to be baptized, just bring an extra change of clothes, all I'm going to say to you. And I'll ask you to check in your pockets so you don't take your phone in there like Jimmy did with his and wash it in the washing machine. But just come and be ready. And if we baptize one, that's great. And if we baptize a dozen, that'll be great too. But if you've been baptized and you've been thinking about needing to be rebaptized, I'll hold you under your bubble. It'll be all right. Just come on back, okay? Looking forward to a good time next Sunday. God's good. I'm telling you, He just helps us so much in every way, and we just need to acknowledge Him a lot of times. But we want you to stick around for that. We didn't say an exact time because you know how it is here. I might get finished at 12:30 and it might be 12:45. So I was kidding about 12:30 or 12:45. Usually you guys are gone by 12:30. Come on, you're not even keeping track. So, looking forward to that and all the other things going on. So remember that. And again, if you want to be baptized, you don't really need to tell me. Just show up with some extra clothes and we'll put you in line. Okay, that'll be fine. All right, we're going to read today several different places in the book of Exodus. We'll start out in Exodus chapter 12, and just they may seem as if they are random verses, okay? But there's a continuity to them, and you'll kind of figure it out as we go along here. But this entire portion of the book of Exodus is dedicated solely to the Passover. And it was the 10th plague that was put on Egypt. And it was the plague of death. And you had to make preparation for that. It's just interesting to me how that God worked there in Egypt to get things done. Those of you who are not studiers of the Bible, there were 10 different plagues that God sent on Egypt to finally soften the heart of Pharaoh where he would let his people go. And the first 3 plagues affected everybody. Affected all the Egyptians, all the Hebrew children, the whole bunch. But then 6 through 9, God just kind of like drew a circle around those Hebrew children and said, that's not going to bother them. And that should have been enough to tell Pharaoh that that was their God. He just didn't get it, you know. He was a man of pride and arrogance, and he wanted things his way. So, you know, that's the way we are sometimes. But God had to soften his heart. And when it came down to the 10th one, the plague of death, the threat on the plague of death was that there would be somebody in the house, every household, the oldest person, the firstborn in every household of man and of beast was going to die unless you went through the process of killing a lamb and taking its blood and putting it on your doorposts. And that blood was a sign as God sent the death angel through that night. The Bible said there was a cry went up from Egypt because there was death in every household if they did not have blood on the door. Well, I don't know that Moses just kept it to the children of Israel, but they're the ones that put the blood over the door. And as soon as the death angel had come through and people woke up, Pharaoh's like, get them people out of here. And they paid them to leave. I don't have time to explain it all to you today, but they paid them to leave. And they had been slaves as a people for 430 years. So finally, freedom. And so, because God had done that for them, He didn't want them to forget. Don't wave your hand, okay? But how many of you forget after a while what God's done for you? We do, don't we? I mean, it's just human nature. Somebody can do something nice for us, and we'll remember it for a day or two. They say something mean to us, we'll never forget it. We ain't speaking to them again. We just hope they die, But they do something nice, we remember it for a little while. And God didn't want them to forget it. So that's what we're focusing on here today, okay, for just a little while as we look into these scriptures. First of all, we're going to go to Exodus chapter 12, verse 14. Just verse 14 right now. And God says this to them as He's given instructions on what they're supposed to do. This day shall be unto you for a memorial. Okay? And ye shall keep it a feast to the Lord throughout your generations. Ye shall keep it a feast by an ordinance forever. And not only was God going to free them by way of this death angel coming through, but He had instructed them that for the next 7 days they were to only eat unleavened bread and to bitter herbs and a few things like that. So it was all part of did you catch the word memorial? What's a memorial all about? It reminds us, right? I have thought many years, and I still haven't done this. I'm 70 years old and haven't done it yet. Couldn't tell you how many times I have driven downtown to Indianapolis past the Indiana War Memorial, and I've never stopped. I'm sure there's names in there. I'm sure there's memorials in there of different people. I've never stopped. I was born and raised a Hoosier, and I know where it's at, but I ain't never stopped. But every time I drive past it, I'm reminded of what it's about. That's what a memorial is, okay? So God's going to do this great work for them, but He's saying, I don't want you to forget it, okay? So let's move down to verse 17 then. God's repetitive. He says it over and over again. And ye shall observe the feast of unleavened bread, for in the selfsame day have I brought your armies out of the land of Egypt. Therefore shall ye observe this day in your generations by an ordinance forever. Okay, drop down to verse 24. We're going to read 24 through 27. And ye shall observe this thing for an ordinance for thee and to thy sons forever. And it shall come to pass, when ye be come to the land which the Lord will give you, according as He hath promised, that ye shall keep this service. And it shall come to pass, when your children shall say unto you, What mean ye by these services? That ye shall say, It is the sacrifice of the Lord's Passover, who passed over the houses of the children of Israel in Egypt when He smote the Egyptians and delivered our houses, and the people bowed the head and worshipped. Memorial, right? You still with me? Drop down to verse 42. God's repetitive. In verse 42, He says, It is a night to be much observed unto the Lord, for bringing them out from the land of Egypt. This is that night of the Lord to be observed in all the children of Israel in their generations. It's a memorial. God wants it done over and over again. Now, I know you're tired of hearing that, but let's go to chapter 13. And we're going to hear it again. Okay? Why do we need to hear it so many times? I'll tell you why. Because it's been proven that we don't really remember something until we hear it at least 7 times. Then it sticks with us. God's repeating Himself, trying to get these people to understand they need to celebrate this. There's a point behind what I'm doing, guys, okay? You think I'm just being redundant? There's a point behind this, okay? So hold on. Chapter 13, verses 3 through 10. And Moses said unto the people, Remember this day in which ye came out from Egypt, out of the house of bondage. For by strength of hand the Lord brought you out from this place. There shall no leavened bread be eaten. This day came ye out in the month Abib. And it shall be, when the Lord shall bring thee into the land of the Canaanites, and the Hittites, and the Amorites, and the Hivites, and the Jebusites, which He sware unto thy fathers to give thee, a land flowing with milk and honey, that thou shalt keep this service in this month. 7 days thou shalt eat unleavened bread, and the 7th day shall be a feast to the Lord. Unleavened bread shall be eaten 7 days, and there shall no leaven bread be seen with thee, neither shall there be leaven seen with thee in all thy quarters. And thou shalt show thy sons in that day, saying, This is done because of that which the Lord did unto me when I came forth out of Egypt. And it shall be for a sign unto thee upon thine hand, and for a memorial between thine eyes, that the Lord's law may be in thy mouth. For with a strong hand hath the Lord brought thee out of Egypt. Thou shalt therefore keep this ordinance in his season from year to year. One more place in chapter 14 or 13, drop down to verse 14, 15, and 16. It shall be, when thy son asketh thee in time to come, saying, What is this? That thou shalt say unto him, By strength of hand the Lord brought us out from Egypt, from the house of bondage. And it came to pass, when Pharaoh would hardly let us go, that the Lord slew all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, both the firstborn of man and the firstborn of beast. Therefore I sacrifice to the Lord all that openeth the matrix, being males, but all the firstborn of my children I redeem. And it shall be for a token upon thine hand, and for frontlets between thine eyes. For by strength of hand the Lord brought us forth out of Egypt. Did he make the point that there is a memorial? There's something you're supposed to do every year at the very same time to commemorate what God has done for you. Here's why. Because the next generation is going to go, why are we doing what we're doing? And what are you supposed to do? The title of our message, pass it on. You're supposed to let them know what God did for you. A memorial. Okay? Now, just going to go over here to Leviticus chapter 23. You're welcome to go over there with me. I'm not going to read a whole lot there. Actually, I'm probably not going to read anything. But everything I'm going to talk to you about here for the next few minutes is in Leviticus chapter 23. This is the law that God had laid down for the people. And of course, you guys are past Leviticus 23 now, so you're ready for it almost, ain't you? Okay, who's teaching 23? Anybody want to raise a hand? They don't know. They argue over who's going to teach, I think, every week. Okay, Anthony's going to. So I'm not going to step on it too bad, Anthony, okay? I'll let you walk all over it, okay? But God's going to place some demands on the people, not only what he talked about over there in Exodus, but he's going to give them some more things that they need to celebrate, okay? So the first thing that he mentions in verse 3 of chapter 23 is that they need to remember the Sabbath. Well, that's one of the 10 commandments, ain't it? Isn't it? Yeah. God said, remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy, for in 6 days God created the heavens and the earth, but on the seventh day he rested. Okay? Now, I'm not here to argue which is the Sabbath day, whether it's Saturday or Sunday. I don't really care, okay? But we use the Sunday as our Sabbath, right? Okay? God said, keep that. And they weren't supposed to work. Sabbath, by the way, in case, I'll just say this before we get into all the rest of this. We're going to talk about all their festivals here very, very quickly. But they're all Sabbaths. You're not supposed to work in any of them, okay? Not in any of them. Did you notice over there on the Feast of Unleavened Bread on the seventh day, it was a Sabbath unto the Lord. You don't work, okay? You could work the rest of the time. You should work that time. But Sabbath means rest or a cessation from activity. And so that means, guys, you can go home, kick your feet up, watch NASCAR, Jim, if you want to. Just don't drive the car. You can watch it, but don't drive the car, okay? I'm only picking on Jimmy because he's a NASCAR fan, okay? Take a break from all your daily routine, your daily work. That's what a Sabbath is all about. God demanded that of his people, even again here in Leviticus chapter 23. And the next one that he lists is the Passover, which we just read about, right? Keep that. Why? Because that reminds us that God delivers. God delivered the people. That's what Passover is all about. And then in conjunction with Passover, which happened on the 14th of the month Abib, or Nisan later on the 15th, for the next 7 days, you celebrate the Feast of Unleavened Bread, okay? And that symbolizes that God delivered them again and sustained them in the wilderness. So you have the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And the next feast that is listed here in Leviticus chapter 23 is the Feast of First Fruits, which they were to celebrate when they landed in the Promised Land. See, for 40 years they wandered in the wilderness. They didn't need to celebrate first fruits. But when they settled the Promised Land, crops were already planted. Everything was all ready. All they had to do was gather it in. But God told them to do it forever. So there was a spring harvest, there was a fall harvest. So the spring harvest is the Feast of First Fruits. And what that was all about was to remind them every year that God provides everything. Everything comes from God. See, we forget that in the country we live in, right? I mean, does anybody here raise a garden? Anybody? Raise a hand. Well, we're down to about nothing here, I'm telling you. Just a few of us raise a little garden, okay? You know, I love the garden when things start coming in. I like them fresh beans, don't you? Go out there and pick them babies, you know, and then you got to string them, break them up, and all that stuff. But once you cook them, they're good, right? Go out and grab you a nice ripe tomato, right? Yeah, I grow tomatoes right by my garden so that when I'm riding the lawnmower, I can just grab me one while I'm going and eat while I'm mowing. It's more difficult now with the zero turn because you got to kind of work both hands, you know. But I got that down pat. But that's good, ain't it? But how do we get it? Well, God provides it. See, so many kids today think that, you know, well, that food, I'll just go down to Kroger or Walmart and buy my food. Well, it's got to grow somewhere, right? God provides all that. That's what the Feast of First Fruits was all about, was to give credit to God, give credit where credit is due. The next feast you'll find listed in here, and this is in verse 15, is the Feast of Pentecost, okay, which is 50 days after the Passover feast. And of course, you know, here we are, modern day Christians, we think of Pentecost, we think of the day of Pentecost, right? When the Spirit of God was given. Well, they didn't have that. So what is their Pentecost all about? Well, it's about the giving of the law. And you can read about that over there in Exodus chapter 20. And said this yesterday in the study that I was in on the book of Exodus. I've been in Exodus way too much with too many groups here in the last few months. So that's why you guys are getting Exodus a lot, I guess, okay? But in Exodus chapter 20, that's a historical moment. Because it's the first time in the history of the world that God, and we'll say it like this, hope it don't offend you, and if it does, too bad, you'll get over it, okay? First time in history, God gives us His opinion on what He expects out of us when He gave us the Ten Commandments. First time in the history of the world. That's a great time to celebrate, right? God gave us the law at Sinai, and so God's telling His people, when you get into the land that I'm going to give you, don't forget to celebrate that I told you my expectations of you. Celebrate that. Okay? That's a good time to celebrate. You guys still with me, right? Yeah, I ain't lost you yet. Okay. So, the next one that you'll read in here in verse 24, this takes place in the 7th month, is the Feast of Trumpets. Feast of Trumpets. And I used to always wonder, what's the Feast of Trumpets all about? Well, they blew trumpets. That's what they did. They blew the horn. But why did they do that? Well, it was a celebration. See, their religious year started in the first month, Abib. But on the 7th month, that celebration is the time that Joshua led the people across the Jordan River into the Promised Land, and that started their civil year. Okay, now I don't make much sense to us because we have one calendar, right? This started their civil year. So what was the trumpets all about? It was a celebration, starting the celebration of God bringing them into the Promised Land. That's a good day to remember, isn't it? Not just leaving Egypt, but 40 years later, and a few months later, they got to cross the Jordan River and go into the Promised Land. Day of excitement. God doesn't want them to forget. Why? Because He's done all of this for them, and He wants them to remember. Okay. Next one is the Day of Atonement. Okay? The Day of Atonement, which takes place somewhere around October. That's when the Feast of Trumpets takes place too for us. On the Day of Atonement, this was a special day of worship for everybody. You see, everybody was required to offer a sacrifice to God if you'd done any sin. How many of you here haven't done any sin? How many have offered a sacrifice lately? We don't have to do that because Christ took our place. But under the Old Testament law, you had to offer sacrifices for yourself. So daily at the temple, the priests were offering sacrifice. But the Day of Atonement was a little different because this day, you didn't have to bring your sacrifice. What the high priest did is he offered a sacrifice for you, for the whole people. He offered a sacrifice for himself. He went through a whole lot of ceremonial cleansing and putting on the right garment and all that. And then he sacrificed an animal on behalf of the sins of the people of Israel. And so just in case you were one of them people who said, well, I don't do anything wrong, I'm not going to offer any sacrifices, he did it for you. Okay? So that was a day of celebration. And all of that pointed toward Christ. When He came and died on the cross, His sacrifice was not for Him, but for us. So, Day of Atonement's a big day, right? Don't want you to forget. That happened every year. Then, we had the Feast of Tabernacles, or also known as the Feast of Booths. And that celebration was, it's kind of a weird time, because what they did is even after they had settled in the Promised Land for a lot of years, about 1,500 years as a matter of fact, they still celebrated. Matter of fact, if you read the book of John, chapter 7, you'll read about Jesus going to Jerusalem during the Feast of Tabernacles, or the Feast of Booths. And here's what they'd do. They'd move out of their house, and they'd build a little lean-to somewhere, or set up a tent, and they'd camp out for a period of time. But that was to remind them of their journey through the wilderness and how that God provided for them. Jesus takes that time to talk about being the bread of life, which was the manna that was given from heaven. He talks to them about if they're thirsty, He can give them water to drink, which God did more than one time, didn't He, as they traveled through the wilderness. So the Feast of Tabernacles was a time that they were to be reminded again of what God had done for them. Now that's your history lesson today, okay? But then there's a couple more. They're not in Leviticus chapter 23. That's actually in chapter 25. We had sabbatical years. Everybody know what a sabbatical year is? You planted your fields for 6 years. The 7th year you didn't plant anything. God just took care of them. Okay? And then we also, in that same chapter, we have the year of Jubilee. So after you had 7 Sabbath years, which would be 49 years. And on the 50th year, you had the year of Jubilee, and that involved a lot of things of letting people go. But all that is symbolic of what God had done for them while they were in Egypt, when they came out of Egypt, and how He protected them through the wilderness and helped them settle into a land that He had promised to Abraham. So they got a lot of time to celebrate, don't they? And they're supposed to do it every year. Now, what's all of that got to do with us? Has anybody already asked themselves that? What's that got to do with us? Well, what was the reason behind keeping the Passover? God told them. When your children ask you, why are you doing this? Here's what you tell them. You tell them, we're celebrating what God did for us when He delivered our forefathers from Egypt. And you're supposed to tell them how He did it. You got to pass on the message. Got to pass on the message. Okay, I had to write this down because I couldn't remember. I know the quote, but I couldn't remember who said it. Lord George Carey. He's a former Archbishop of Canterbury, which doesn't mean anything to us, but that's kind of the Pope of the Church of England, okay, the Anglican Church. But he said this one time, just a couple of decades ago, actually, and he's talking about the Anglican Church because he saw the church declining in attendance and in support, and just obviously wasn't growing. So he was concerned, okay? And so he said this about that. He said the church is one generation from extinction. That's true. our little gathering here today, and I'm always glad to see everybody that's here. And I look around, and I always see there's people missing, but there's different reasons they're gone. But I love that I'm in a church right now that has got a bunch of kids that leave us before service actually gets started too good. I love that. I even like them to make a little noise once in a while. I know it freaks parents out, okay? Because they're like, oh, he won't shut up, Let him make a little noise. You know why? That's life, buddy. That's life. I like that. You guys don't know, I came from a church that I pastored for 7 years. We didn't have one kid. Not one kid, and they didn't want any, and they didn't care. I'm like, you're going to die, and I'm not going to sit around here and watch you die. I'm leaving. I'm going somewhere else. Okay? That's what's happening, right? If we're not careful, even with this good group of young people that we've got, and they're active, they got up and sung for us today, right? A couple of times we've got them to sing. I love that we need more of that. Why? Because if we don't tell them, if we don't pass on the message of Jesus Christ to them, the church is over with. It's done. It's finished. Because we will be the ones that will have to hold the obligation to pass it on to the next generation. I get concerned because we do have times in America, we have days of celebration, right? We call them national holidays. And they're more important than just we get a day off and get to cook with the family or hang out, okay? They're more important than that. Let's face it, I'm just going to be direct with you today. I always am, right? I get leery when I hear a preacher stand up and say, "No, I'm going to be honest with you." I keep thinking, did he just lie to me? So I'm always honest with you, okay? I just try to be straightforward and direct with you, okay? A little bit concerned when it comes to Christmas time about the messaging of the church. What should be our message about Christmas time? Birth of Christ. That's the heart and soul of that holiday, right? But we're guilty, aren't we, of getting caught up in all the commercialism, and we got to do this, and we got to do that, and really, when it comes to the program that's going to be going on at church, nobody really wants to direct it. Nobody wants to bring it up. You know why? Because we're going to hear people whine and complain. Well, you want us to practice, and I need to be doing this, and I need to be doing that, But really, we need to be excited because that's the time we need to be excited about the fact that God sent His only Son into the world to die for our sins. That's the celebration of His coming. Now, was He born on December 25th? Probably not, okay? Probably born like in April or May. But we picked out a day. Folks, let's stick with it. Let's tell our children what it's all about. I've been here 9 years, going on 10 years, and I've told you every year, and some of you watch it. Every year we gather down at my parents' house. It's Dad's house now. Mom's gone. But all of my life, every time we've got together as a family on Christmas Eve, Dad sits down. He opens up his Bible. I remember this as a children with my siblings sitting there. Dad would open up the Bible on Christmas Eve and say, "Now, kids, I'm going to read the real Christmas story." And when we got smartphones, my oldest daughter, Smart Aleck, puts it on Facebook. So you can watch it if you're a friend of mine or you're a friend of hers. It don't matter. Just get on there and watch it. You'll see Dad sitting. He's now 96 years old, and every one of the grandkids and great-grandkids know what's going to happen after we eat. Before you get to open a present, you're going to hear the real Christmas story. You know why? Because He wants them to know that's really what Christmas is all about. And it's a tradition that I treasure. And I told the kids this year, Dad, he can't hardly hear. You got to yell at him now, make him hear. But he walks in there and gets in his seat and he opens the book. And I said, well, let's go in and listen to him one more time, guys. And I don't know about you, but this is number 70 for me. And I ain't tired of it yet. Pass it on to the next generation, right? What's the purpose behind Thanksgiving? Just so we can get together with family and eat till we can't hardly eat no more and watch some football? Why was it proclaimed as a national holiday? For the same reason that God had them celebrate the Feast of First Fruits. So that we can remember that God is the one that has given us what we have. Bountiful food, right? A great country to live in. You've got a lot of flaws. There's a lot of problems. Still the greatest country on the face of the earth. And we are to thank God for that, right? What's Memorial Day all about? So you can get together with family. Oh, that's the first holiday of summer, isn't it? Oh, summer's here. We've had Memorial Day. Then we go around and stick flowers on people's graves. It's the only time we ever think about them. So I guess better go decorate a grave or two, you know. It didn't originally start out as that, did it? You know, now they call it Decoration Day. Memorial Day was all about honoring those who have died so that you and I could have freedom. Right? I mean, I hear veterans say once in a while who have had live combat, have been right in the thick of things. You know, I'm not a hero. The heroes are really in the graveyard because they gave the ultimate price. We need to remind ourselves of that, don't we? I mean, on and on. We got Veterans Day. That's not about the dead ones. That's about the live ones, right? We celebrate that. We got the 4th of July. We got all these things, okay? What are we supposed to do? Is it just a family gathering? I hear that all the time. Oh, it's about getting together with family. No, it's not. No. Easter Sunday morning, folks, is not about getting new clothes and putting it on. And I don't see women wearing their Easter bonnets much anymore, but they used to, you know. You always got a new one, got a new dress, you know. I remember sister got a new dress and got to go to church. And me and my brother, we'd have to get a new suit on. We hated it because we had to put it on, you know, and wear it to church. But it's Easter, so we'll do it, you know. And I'd usually go home with grass stains on my knees and get in trouble. So much for that new suit. But it wasn't about that, was it? It's not about that, is it? It's about us having an opportunity. It gives us, can I say it like, it gives us an excuse to talk about what it's really about. You see, these festivals that the Jews had, that's what it was about. It was to force them to address what God had done for them and to tell the next generation so that they would have faith in the very same God that had delivered their forefathers from Egypt. And so we have an obligation today, don't we? To pass the message on to the next generation. How do we do that? Well, I think it starts by being an example. Doesn't it? Starts by being an example. I thought about this a lot this week. I study a lot of times. I still average probably 20 plus hours a week studying for a message on Sunday morning. And people say, well, you sit at the desk all that time. I don't like the desk that well. I don't. I study while I'm driving down the road. I talk to the Lord. Scriptures run through my mind. I got to reminiscing about this, about setting an example. And I'm not here to throw anybody under the bus, so I don't want to hurt your feelings at all. If it does, so what? Too bad. It's done happened, okay? But I remember growing up, and I remember a guy that I hung around with, one of my best friends in grade school. And I don't know why his name came to me. Hadn't thought of that guy in years. And I thought, I wonder how he's doing now and what's going on in his life. And I remember we'd spend time at one another's house. And I loved to go to his house. His dad was a builder, and we always liked the day they brought appliances in, when they brought them in big cardboard boxes, you know. We'd take them boxes out behind that house that was being built, and we'd take old crooked nails and put it together and build our own house of them cardboard boxes. Then his dad would burn them later on that day and hurt our feelings, you know. We had a lot of fun. But I was there. I remember being there at his home one day, and his mom was talking about them going to the drive-in and seeing a movie. And she said, would you like to go with us? And I said, you go where? She said, the drive-in. She said, did your church believe in going to the movies? I said, I don't know. I've never been to one. She said, well, they probably don't believe in it then. You don't need to go. And I thought, well, what goes on at the movies? You see, I was taught you don't need to go there. Now, I'm going to tell you this. Back in the 60s, you could have went and been just fine, right? You ought not to go there now. I mean, from what I read and understand, you probably ought not to go there. But there's a lot of the church world will go. Why? Because we need to be entertained. What kind of example are we setting when we can be found in places that are typically occupied by the world? Think about it. Now, I love music. I love it. I don't go to rock concerts anymore. I learned how to play Stairway to Heaven sitting right down at the edge of the stage watching Jimmy Page play it on his guitar. And I thought, I can do that. I don't go watch Jimmy Page play anymore, and he's a good guitarist, okay? Our example. See, some of you are getting squirrely on me right now. You're sitting there going, talking to me. No, I'm just telling you guys, okay? Our example, the things that we do day in and day out, make a reflection on what we say we believe. Right? And so if we're going to pass this thing on to another generation, and it might not be our children, okay? I mean, my children know, okay? I see a little post from one of them once in a while, or all three of them actually saying, well, you know, we didn't do stuff like that growing up. When you're in a pastor's house, you don't do that stuff. Makes me wonder, are they doing it now? Because if they are, I need to pay them a visit. But you know what I'm saying, okay? But they've been told all their life, okay? Now I've got grandchildren that I get to pass it on to. Not just my grandchildren, but my brother's grandchildren, because he's no longer here. He can't talk to them. He can't share it with them. So I feel an obligation for those little great nephews and nieces to pass the message on to them. And not just them, but there's a whole host of young people within the Separate Baptist for the last 43 years have heard me preach at youth camps and try to point them in the way they need to go. We never run out of a host of people to influence. Did you know that? They don't have to be yours. They can be somebody else's. And we need to set an example from them. Well, not just our example is what we do, partly, isn't it? Does what you do matter? Does it? Yes, because what we do shows our priorities. Hold on to your blue seat, because we're going to go back to the old law. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. They didn't come to church on the Sabbath day because they didn't have one. Okay? But that day was different because whatever Dad's occupation was, he didn't go there. Mom didn't mop the floors and clean the windows and vacuum the rug. She took that day off. Okay? And they wondered why. I would say today I could go mostly into Christian homes on Sunday and I wouldn't see much difference than if I was there on Monday. What we do matters. It shows our priorities. One thing I can tell you, I'm just going to have to talk about the home I grew up in, and my home was the same way as I raised my children. Growing up, I've heard this excuse, and if you've used it, okay, quit using it, okay? Well, we didn't get to come to church because we had family come over. We had company. Do you know that never happened in our house? You know why? Everybody knew we were going to church. Yeah. I asked Dad one time, I said, what would you have done if somebody came over? He said, I'd have told them to lock up when they left because we was going to church. That's what we do. And why do we go to church? Because we owe God this day? No, because we want to come and we want to be fed. We want to be encouraged. We want to fellowship. We want to sing songs and praise Him. And we want to be a light that shines in the world. So our priority is on that day at service time, that's where we're going to be. And if the church had an activity, guess where we were going to be? In the church activity, whether it was going out, passing out flyers about a revival or a youth gathering, or whether it's inviting people to Sunday school or increasing the bus route we had in Indianapolis there, or the routes, it was more than one, and getting people to come. Whatever it was, that was top priority in our family. Now, I played sports in school, but I was told when I started playing, when I joined the gymnastics team, when I was on the football team, I was told, that's nice, but if there's ever a game or a gymnastics meet when there's church, guess where you're going? No question. I already knew. Why? Because my parents wanted me to know what was most important in life, and it was not sports, and it was not any other activity I wanted to go in. You see, and I don't want to make anybody mad. Don't hurt your feelings, but I'm just going to, again, be straight with you. If you are centering your life's activities about what your child wants to do, and you're neglecting the worship and the work of God, you are wrong in what you're doing. Because you're teaching that child your priorities and church doesn't matter. And when church doesn't matter to you, it will matter less to your children, and their children will shrug their arms and say, "What is church?" You guys understand what I'm saying? I'm not fussing at you. I'm just telling you the facts, right? Christianity is one generation away from extinction. Some of you here, bring your grandchildren. Thank you. Thank you. We've got a youth program right here. Most people aren't taking advantage of on Sunday night. It's a little small group, sometimes 4 or 5. You know why? Because nobody will bring their children or grandchildren. I want it to be successful. Can I drop you a little hint? Bring your kids. They'll feed them with candy and get them all lit up on caffeine before you go home. And you'll know what's happening then, right? But they'll love every minute of it. And guess what? They're going to hear about Jesus. Our priorities are a sign to the world about what we believe and why we believe and who we're following. Let me tell you, I got 3 girls they bleed blue. They are UK fans to the bone. I moved to Kentucky. I didn't know anything about college basketball. People kept talking about it. I said, "What are you guys talking about? Man, you don't keep up with college basketball?" No, never paid attention to it in my life. What'd you keep up with? Well, I kept up with the Pacers up in Indianapolis, and didn't keep up with them much. And, I've quit keeping up with all of them. You know why? Because now they get in the way of serving God. And I'm not talking about just coming to church. I'm talking about visiting people and praying with people and encouraging people. Our activities, the things we do, reflect our priorities in life. And if you really love God and you really want to win people to Jesus Christ, you'll find out you're going to turn loose of a lot of things in this world in order to serve God. God's demanding that of those people. You understand that, don't you? He's asking that of us. But then, not only is it what we do, it's what we say. It's what we say. The words that we use. And not just the words that we use, but how we use them. How many of you husbands here today can testify to this? You can get that look from your wife and she don't have to say a word. Wives and husbands are both laughing because they know it's true, isn't it? If you are an adult today and you had parents that were disciplinarians, okay, didn't care to beat you when you needed it. Mom could say all day, "I'm going to wear you boys out." Right. Dad could be sitting in his easy chair reading the newspaper and me and Rick be scuffling on the floor. He'd drop his newspaper and go, "Better sit down." You have to say a word, right? You see, a lot of times we get concerned about the words that we use and we forget the attitude that goes along with it. But those things go a long way, don't they? In your witness for Jesus Christ. They go a long way, not just the words, but how you say them. Listen, when I talk about Jesus Christ, I hope you understand I'm excited. You know why? Because of what He did for me. This is not a nonchalant statement that says, I still love Psalm 40 where David wrote, that I cried unto the Lord and He inclined His ear unto me. He brought me up out of a horrible pit and set my feet upon a solid rock. That excites me. You know why? Because that's exactly what Jesus Christ did for me. He brought me up out of the horrible pit of sin, out of the miry clay. He set my feet on a rock and established my going. And I don't say that with a monotone in my voice. That excites me. You know why? Because it really happened. You need to get excited about serving Jesus Christ, folks, and spread the gospel with joy in your mind instead of saying, "Well, they got church tomorrow and I'm going to go down there, revival's going on. I know I'm awful busy, but, I don't want them thinking bad about me. I'm going to go down to revival, Well, you guys are laughing, but that's your attitude a lot of time, isn't it? Can I just tell you one of my little pet peeves right here about revival? It just disgusts me when the church gets together and starts talking about revival and everybody pulls out their calendar. I'm busy that week. Kids got ball games and we're going to be on vacation and you know what? That's kind of a bad time for me. And everybody's going, "Well, let's pick another week. We don't want to leave anybody out." You know what my opinion is? Schedule it. If they want to be there, they will. Better yet, let's just pray it down and let it get started and we won't worry about a calendar. It can happen, right? What's the difference? Our priorities, our attitude. And listen, kids are watching us. Did you know that? Lost people are watching us. We've got a great responsibility. God's not making us do these feasts. He's asking us to be a witness in everything we say and do. Why? Because the future of the church and the future, I'd like to see heaven full, wouldn't you? I don't think we'll ever fill it up. I think if you ever got it close to full, God will just make it a little bit bigger. There's room for everybody. But we've got awful complacent about passing it on. So God told the children of Israel, I want you to celebrate this every year at the same time. And as you celebrate, when your children say, what's this all about? Take the time to tell them the whole truth and nothing but the truth. And don't hold nothing back on what God did for you. That's what we need to do in our world, don't you think? I think it's important. Now, I'm not here to browbeat you, okay? I'm just here to encourage you, and I got to ask you this question. We're coming down to the end of the message, and you're saying, oh, thank God, he's going to shut up. Brother Dan, come on, give us a song. And I'm going to ask you this question. Because I think it's important. And I've asked myself this question all week long as I've worked. Is your relationship with Jesus Christ evident to other people in your daily life? Or to put it another way, do they see Jesus in you? Do they? Because if they're struggling in life and they see that life's not getting you down, they're going to want to know why. When they know you've lost a loved one and they see that you're still holding your head high, oh, you're hurting, but you know that there's a reunion that can take place later on. Sometimes they go, how do you do that? I'm going to share this because it just came into my mind, Brother Dan. You don't have to sit down. It won't be that long, okay? Young boy went to my home church, same age as my middle daughter. He sat down anyway. That hurts, brother. Not really. This is a serious story, okay? It really is. Young man, young boy, he was 16, maybe 17 years old. I don't know how old he was, but you know how boys are. They're always challenging one another to do things. And they were at one place in town, and there was another place on the other side of town, and two boys were arguing over who can get there the first, you know. So they both jump in cars and they take off. Well, this young man that grew up at New Hope Church was in an accident, killed him instantly. Just killed him. And I went down to see his parents, I knew him very well. And I went in, talked to his mother. She was a regular attender of the church. His dad never came, alcoholic, as far as I know. He still could be. Haven't seen him in a while. But he was sitting there in such turmoil, wringing his hands. And I could smell the alcohol on him. And I'm not going to really try to witness to somebody who's drunk because I don't know if they're going to remember or not, you know. He was so tore up and weeping because he'd lost his only son. And I said, I didn't understand that. I couldn't comprehend it, you know. But he said, I just lost him. And I said, well, you know, I'll come talk to you later on. Well, in the meantime, my son dies. Before I ever got a chance to go talk to him. And he comes down to our house. This is the night he died. And I'm just sitting there talking with people, and he's wringing his hands and walking the floor, and he looked at me, and he said, I don't say you can sit there. I don't understand. And I looked at him, and I called him by name. And I said, see, you don't understand that I've got something you don't have. Yeah, I lost my son. But I've got something bigger that I'm holding on to. And I've got a chance of seeing my son again someday, and you don't. And when you're sober, I'm going to come, and I'm going to talk to you about it. And I've tried, but he doesn't want to listen. But that's the hope I have. Was I hurting? Yes. Do I still hurt? Yes. Yes. Matter of fact, just not too long ago was his birthday, and the girls, they always put something on Facebook. They're always talking about it. And then the youngest one, and him and her were very, very close, almost a year apart in age. And she said, Dad, why does it hurt so much every year? I said, because you loved so deeply, it still hurts deeply. But you've got hope. And she goes, I know, but it still hurts. Yes, 29 years, yes, but it still hurts. But we got hope, right? And when my neighbor can look at me and say, I don't see why it's not tearing you up, I can say, I got hope, man. I've got something that gives me grace and gives me strength, gives me courage in the midst of all of the trying times in my life. And you don't have that, but I wish that you did. I've got something I can share with that guy. And it's more than, well, God helped me get my car started this morning. You know, it wouldn't start, and He told me which button to push, and it finally started. I hear that stuff, and that's all right. God will do that for you. You know that? Matter of fact, I fixed my lawnmower Monday. I got finished mowing. It shut off. I couldn't get it to start, and I kept trying everything. And I'm driving home, and God just put in my mind, why don't you try this? And I thought, that ain't the problem. And I walked out there to the shed, opened the door, looked down. You know what? It was the problem. So God can fix your lawnmower. You know what? He can fix your car. But you know more than that? He can fix lives. But we got to pass it on because we've got that in our lives. I want to challenge you to look at your life and see if your daily walk with Jesus Christ is evident to the people in the world. And if it's not, you need to move up. People need to see Jesus in you. And if you need strength and you want to pray about it, we got a great place to pray. And I got a feeling if you were honest with yourself, a bunch of you come up here today and say, God, help me. Help me be the witness that I need to be. And you don't need a special day to do it. You know that? You can do it every day of your life. Every day. If you need to pray, we invite you to come and pray as we stand and sing. What song, Brother Dan?